Good day and welcome to Quilting with Don Part 9. This is it. We're now going to quilt the quilt. So the sips are going to be something like this. If I recall these correctly, after having consulted with, of course, the quilting consultant, Carolyn. First, you measure the top. In this particular case, I'm going to have to actually measure it on the floor because it's too big for my quilt wall that you see set up here. It's not much too big, but it is too big. So I'll lay it out and I'll measure it just like we did before. Okay, so step 1 is to measure. Step 2, cut your batting. And technically, step 2A is iron. Did I say batting? I meant backing. Cut your backing fabric. 2A is ironing the backing fabric, and 2B, or not 2B is actually cutting it to size. So step 3 then is to cut the batting. Now, I just realized I forgot to mention something. When you're cutting the backing, just the way you lay it up on the quilting machine, you need to have it 3 to 4 inches extra on each side. Or maybe I'll show you over here. Ta-da! So I need 3 to 4 inches over here, 3 to 4 inches at the top, and at the bottom. So yeah, you need to add 6 to 8 inches to the dimensions you measured. Should have mentioned that. And the reason I remember that is because for the batting, you don't have to add as much. You just need a couple inches on either side. Once you've measured for the backing, you cut it as well. Carolyn has a stockpile of backing. It looks like, I think it's a standard based stuff. Not too poofy, not too thin, that she uses for most of her quilts. She buys it in bulk. So she's going to sell it to me. I get to use it. That's great. Then, once you've cut everything, you set it up on the long arm. So now let's take a look at the setup we've got here. On Carolyn's long arm sewing machine. Dun dun dun, here it is. So I'm going to walk you through this machine just a little bit to give you an idea of how it works. Let's suffice it to say that when we actually use this, Carolyn is going to be with me every step of the way because this is her baby. What you're looking at here is the actual sewing head. It's called a Quilting 21-inch long arm sewing machine, long arm quilting machine, made by the Grace Company. And this machine, this sewing head, if you will, it rests on a dolly or a carriage that allows the machine to move left and right and forward and back. It's also situated on a 10-foot wide frame. So if I pull over this way, you'll see that the frame is a bit long, right? 10 feet wide. This allows you to sew very wide quilts. The machine itself has software that allows you to program in patterns and have the machine sew the patterns relatively automatically. You'll see when we actually do this that it's not quite as simple as it sounds. But the carriage that the machine the sewing head resides on, you can see just below the gray area there, is motorized. So it follows the software called Quilt Motion, and which is installed on this regular Windows-based tablet. So everything talks to each other. The tablet talks to the machine, talks to the software on the machine, and allows the carriage, the motorized carriage, to do its thing. It's a pretty cool piece of kit. You see here, Carolyn's recently completed and quilted crazy or jazzed up jelly roll quilt. So if you remember on a Quilting with Don, I actually did the Bargello-izing of this quilt. Carolyn did the borders, and then we ran it together on her long arm machine to do a test run for me as well. The fabric is the backing fabric is ready for cutting. To get to this point where I'm about to cut, ooh, exciting stuff, is I ironed the backing fabric first, got rid of there were many, it was pretty good shape, but I got rid of the creases and wrinkles and things. Then it took me a few minutes to figure out how to fold it, to cut it. And the reason is because I'm going to want these kitties, which is on the backing, pointing up. You know, even on the back, you want the kitties facing up, just like we have in the front here. Well, it turns out how they fabricated this fabric is the kitties were sideways. So you couldn't just line the selvage edges up together and cut like you normally would. I had to unfold everything and fold it the other way so that I'm able to roll the material into 4 pieces or 4 layers with the kitties pointing up and down. So then when I make my cut, I get one solid piece that is going to be, in this case, 108 inches long, because that's how much we ordered. We ordered 3 yards of fabric by 72 inches wide. Okay? I already marked it using a marker that when you write on the material, after you iron it and move it around, it disappears, which is cool. So I already marked my 72 inch mark. It's right here. And should be ready to cut. Okay, let's do it. Let the cutting begin. Yep. Okay. Everything lines up. I should point out I'm using Carolyn's extra long ruler, which is pretty cool. There we go. 172-inch piece of fabric. Now there are a couple more cuts required, but I'm not going to bore you with them because I do need to true up what is now the top and bottom of this piece of fabric, because these were the original cut lines from when they cut the fabric off a roll for us. So I need to true those up so that when we pin them on the long arm machine on the rack there, you get a nice straight edge. Now I'm going to do something. I'm going to introduce someone who you have heard about very often for the last several episodes of Quilting with Dawn. And that, of course, is my quilting advisor, my quilting expert extraordinaire, Carolyn. My wife, Carolyn. So, hey. This is her wee beastie, the quilting machine here, which I already introduced to you. And the reason I'm introducing Carolyn now is very simple, because she is going to actually lead the quilting of my kitty quilt. Sure, this is something, you leave to the professionals. Don't try this at home, kids. You make sure that who is doing your quilting knows what they're doing. And because this is quite the machine, you don't want someone like me wrecking it. So sure, I'm going to be on the video and I'm going to be doing all the dog work and you'll see me doing all the pretty stuff. But Carolyn's going to be right with me. And that's why I wanted to introduce Carolyn. So, right on. Let's get to work now. What I'm going to do now, and Carolyn's going to disappear, is I'm going to start putting the quilt onto the rack, onto the frame. Alright, I pinned it at the front, and I'm about to pin the other side, but first, based on Quilting Advisor expertise, I'm going to roll up a fair amount of this backing onto this take-up rod, and as I go along, I smooth it to make sure we get a nice, even quilt top, so that when we actually come time to quilting this baby, and we're working back and forth between the rollers, it's gonna take up and release nice and smooth. See, nice and smooth. What we're going to do is baste the 2 layers together, the batting and the backing, so that it'll hold itself together. You obviously don't baste it on the leader edge. You baste it on the backing itself.
There you go. Hold the fabric tight. There you go.
So as you can probably hear, Carolyn's in the background making sure I do this right, which is exactly what I want. Now I'm just pulling the machine across, putting a nice even basting stitch all the way across the top here. This is why we added an extra 2 to 3 inches to both the top and the bottom of the batting and the backing, because I'm doing this. Because obviously the quilt top now is going to be near here, and not right at the leader edge. I've taken the liberty now of putting the top on the rack, over top of the batting and backing. Backing and batting, anyway. I centered the top on the center marks, but what I also did, in fact, what Carolyn recommended we do, even before I set the top, is I started the bottom of the top, quilt top, on this 3rd rail here, all right? So what that's done is, by doing that also center to center, is ensure that as we're moving back and forth, it keeps everything lined up, left to right, so that it's not going to lose or go astray. Everything's ready to start hitting buttons and quilting. And so, let's sew. Moving right along here, and that's actually working quite well. Touch wood. We're now 22% into this pattern, and we didn't check how many times to repeat the pattern, but it's going to be probably, given where we are, at least six times we've got to do this across. At least six, probably seven. So we finished the first zone, and then what we've done now is move the fabric to the next zone, and now we're just supposed to start sewing after we tell it exactly where we are. And continue on. I am not halfway done yet. It's taking a little longer than planned, as it always does. I've done 3 zones, or I've done 3, if you will, rows across. And the machine is working all right. It's still skipping now and then, and I have to do a quick repair. But it's working all right. So it's beer time. I'm going to have my one of my fave beers. This time it's a Chimay Bleu. Also made by monks, comes from an abbey. And you're gonna start to think all the beers from Belgium come from monks. No, but a lot of the best ones do. So I'm gonna have now my Chimay Bleu. This is I think I had one of these before for you. Well, for me, it's all good. I have one of our quilting cats in the background being frisky. Hey, Vicky. Anyway, santé. Slanjava. Cheers. Welcome to day 2 of part 9 of Quilting with Dawn. Well, last night, after dinner, I went back at her and I finished all but the last row of quilting. So I did 3 zones. It went actually much better than the first 3. Neither Carolyn or I are sure why. Although she didn't even come down and watch. I just did this all on my own, so that's a win for me. And maybe that's why it went very smoothly, because beginner's luck. I'm laughing because you can't see what Carolyn's face that she's giving me right now. But I just jinxed it now, didn't I? Because this last zone is probably going to give me grief, but we're going to do it. So let's do it. And that is done. The quilting is done. When we layered this puppy, we had extra backing and batting all around. So all I have to do now, and this should be straightforward, although I've never done it before, but I know you know I'm going to have help, is trim the edges. I'm not going to subject you to the trimming. I'm not going to show you that. I'll show you when it's done. But that's it. Just got to trim the edges, so we're just down to bare quilt. And done. The quilt is quilted. Lap kitties are quilted. It came out amazing. I've got the pattern with the little paw prints on it, little fish and the hearts, so it's called Kitty Love. And I'll put up a picture of the pattern somewhere. You'll have seen a picture of the pattern by a company called Creative Stitches. And I used purple thread. I didn't want a color that was going to stand out too much. I wanted to still have the cats, black cats in relief. Yet you still wanted to see the quilting. So I picked a purple, which is an in-between color, and it shows throughout the entire quilt, so it's lovely. Even Carolyn said, came out pretty good. I'll take that as high praise. Because really, even though I had a lot of help, the mistakes were mine to make, and I made them, and I fixed them. So I think it came out great. Well, the thing left to do, which I'll show in the next episode of Quilting with Don, is the borders, the binding. Pardon me, the binding. So we'll talk about that next time. But this is mostly done, and I'm very happy with it. You guys have a great day. Cheers.